Someone in your group has done something wrong. Not wrong by accident. Wrong on purpose. They took something that wasn't theirs, or said something they knew would damage you, or formed an alliance behind your back that shifts the balance of power in the group in ways that leave you exposed. You feel it in your chest before you can name it. A hot, tightening thing that makes you want to do something immediately, even though you do not yet know what. This is jealousy. This is betrayal. And both of these experiences are so old, so deeply wired into the human animal, that archaeologists have found evidence of their consequences in bones that are 60,000 years old. The modern world gives you a lot of distance from these feelings. You can block someone, delete them, move to a different city, never think about them again. Your ancestors had none of that distance. In a band of 20 to 50 people, the person who betrayed you was still sleeping 15 feet away from you that night, and the next night, and every night after that, possibly for the rest of your life. How your ancestors survived that, and what it did to the structure of their social world, is a story that has almost everything to do with how your brain handles these feelings right now. Let us start with jealousy, because jealousy is older than humans. Evolutionary psychologist David Buss, whose cross-cultural research on human mating and emotion spans decades and dozens of countries, has documented patterns of jealousy that appear consistently across cultures with no contact with each other, no shared language, no shared religious tradition. The content of what triggers jealousy differs slightly by context, but the experience itself, the hot flood of attention narrowing onto a perceived threat to something you value, is universal. Buss argues this is because jealousy evolved as a detection and defense mechanism. It is not a character flaw. It is a biological alarm system, built by natural selection precisely because the things that trigger it, threats to a romantic bond, to status within a group, to access to resources, were genuinely dangerous to your ancestors' survival and reproduction. In a hunter-gatherer band, the stakes attached to jealousy were not emotional in the modern therapeutic sense. They were existential. If your pair bond dissolved because of interference from another group member, your access to cooperative parenting, to food sharing, to social support was immediately at risk. If your status within the group dropped because someone undermined your reputation, your ability to influence decisions that affected your own survival dropped with it. Jealousy in the ancestral environment was not just a feeling, it was a crisis signal. Now think about betrayal, which is different from jealousy in an important way. Jealousy is about a threat to something you value. Betrayal is about a violation of trust by someone you depended on. And trust, in a hunter-gatherer band, was not a nicety. It was the infrastructure. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm, in his landmark research on the social dynamics of forager groups compiled in Hierarchy in the Forest, documented how profoundly small-scale societies depend on the reliability of each member. When you go out on a hunt together and one person fails to hold their position, an animal escapes and the whole group goes hungry. When you share critical information about where water or food can be found, and someone hoards that information for personal advantage, people die. When two members of the band form a secret coalition to gain influence over group decisions and exclude others from the process, the egalitarian structure that keeps the group stable begins to fracture. Betrayal in a hunter-gatherer context was therefore not a private interpersonal wound. It was a social emergency. And the group treated it accordingly. Polly Wiessner, whose 40 years of fieldwork among the Jew Hoansi San people of the Kalahari has produced some of the most detailed documentation of forager social life available, describes how violations of trust and reciprocity within the band triggered a rapid and coordinated group response. The response did not always look like confrontation. Often it looked like storytelling. A figure in a communal narrative who behaved in ways that paralleled the betrayer's actions and who suffered consequences for it served as a public message that required no direct accusation. Everyone understood it, including the person it was aimed at. So let's reconstruct what a betrayal episode actually looked like 50,000 years ago. Someone in your band has formed a private alliance with two other members. This alliance has been giving them advance information about group decisions before those decisions are made publicly, allowing them to position themselves advantageously in ways the rest of the group cannot. You do not discover this all at once. You notice it in small things first. A slight shift in how certain conversations end. The way two people exchange a look when a third person speaks. The fact that someone seemed to anticipate an outcome before it happened. The human brain is exquisitely sensitive to these signals. Your ancestors' survival depended on reading social environments with precisely this kind of granular attention. The feeling that follows recognition is not simple anger. It is a complex of anger, fear, and grief layered together. Anger at the violation. Fear because a secret alliance shifts the power balance inside the group and you do not yet know how far it extends. Grief because the person who betrayed you was someone you trusted. And trust in a world of 20 to 50 people is not something you can easily replace. What you do not do in most documented forager societies is explode immediately. Primatologist Frans de Waal, whose decades of research on conflict and reconciliation in social primates at the Yerkes National Primate Research Center, has illuminated how closely related human social responses are to those of our nearest relatives, describes the management of social tension in group living primates as a sophisticated balancing act between immediate emotional impulse and longer-term social calculation. You feel the urge to act. You also know, at some level below conscious thought, that acting badly will cost you more than the betrayal already has. Here is the counterintuitive twist that almost no modern discussion of these emotions ever acknowledges. Jealousy and betrayal in the ancestral environment were not primarily personal tragedies. They were social information. They told the group something important about the reliability of one of its members, and the group used that information. Boehm's cross-cultural research shows that in virtually every documented forager society, the response to betrayal was not purely the victim's to manage. It was collective. Once the broader group understood that a member had violated trust, the graduated social sanctions that hunter-gatherer communities used to regulate behavior, beginning with ridicule and moving through criticism, ostracism, and in extreme cases more permanent consequences, were activated by the group as a whole. The victim of a betrayal was rarely alone in their response. They were backed by the social structure of the band itself, which had a vested interest in maintaining the norms of reciprocity and honesty that made cooperation possible. This created something that has almost no modern equivalent. A social environment in which betrayal was extremely high cost. Not because of legal consequence, but because the group itself was the enforcement mechanism. To betray someone in a band of 40 people was to risk the trust of all 40. Now mirror this onto the world you actually live in. Your brain still runs this ancient software. When you feel jealousy, it is still your biological alarm system telling you that something you depend on is threatened. When you feel betrayed, it is still your ancient social brain registering a violation of the reciprocity networks that your species depends on for survival. The feelings are not irrational. They are ancient. They are information. What has changed is the context. You have legal systems and HR departments and the ability to physically leave. Your ancestors had the band, the fire, and the collective enforcement of social norms. The software is the same. The operating environment is completely different. But there is one more thing worth understanding about how the ancestral environment shaped these responses. Healing from betrayal in a hunter-gatherer band was not optional. There was no city to move to. There was no fresh start with strangers who didn't know your history. If the person who betrayed you was useful to the group in other ways, there was a strong social pressure towards some form of managed reconciliation. Frans de Waal's research documents how post-conflict behavior in social primates, what researchers call reconciliation, serves a specific function. It restores the working relationship between individuals who need each other, even after genuine violation. Your ancestors lived inside that same pressure every day. The wound of betrayal had to be metabolized, in public, within the same social world where the betrayal happened. This is why the feelings produced by jealousy and betrayal are so viscerally physical, so hard to think clearly inside of. They were designed for a world that demanded immediate social calculation under conditions of maximum emotional intensity. Every person in your ancestral band who felt these emotions and managed them badly enough to destroy their relationships without the option of leaving and starting over, paid a survival cost. Every person who felt them and managed them well, who stayed functional, who maintained enough credibility and alliance within the group to weather the crisis, survived, and had children. You are descended from the ones who managed it. The question your ancestors faced every time these emotions arose was the same one you face. What do I do with this information? And how do I act in a way that preserves my position in the group, not just right now, but in the long run, across the years and years of proximity that no one in your band can escape? Someone in your group has done something wrong. Your chest is tight. The feeling is as old as the species. What you do next is up to you, and it always has been.